We are now moving to the third and last part of our topic on unemployment, which is the economically marginalized groups. As I indicated, it's going to be very important for you to be able to briefly discuss what is economically marginalized groups and to be able to also describe briefly what is economically marginalized groups for the purposes of your examination. Okay? Right, what economically marginalized groups? Guys, very important. This is what is very important for you to understand before we discuss this in detail. Economically marginalized groups, in a nutshell, refers to those groups of people who are not likely to benefit from the same job creation measures as, for example, the educated or skilled workers. So the key factor that contributes to economic marginalization or that contributes to an increase in economically marginalized groups is limited or no access to education, which is in turn leads to poverty in the areas where these groups are found. Very important, okay? And economically marginalized groups, they are associated with other socio-economic issues, okay, in our communities. And what are these other socio-economic issues that are aligned or that are related to economically marginalized groups? We may refer to an increase in crime or underdeveloped infrastructure or limited investment opportunities in those particular areas, which means there was going to be an increase in the socioeconomic issues, consequently further cripple economic development in that particular areas. We have a variety number of people that we consider to be economically marginalized groups, and it's very important for you to be able to know what are the economically marginalized groups. First, we may talk about young black males. Young black males living in rural areas are most likely to be affected by poverty and are therefore identified as economically marginalized in South Africa. So the first group of economically marginalized groups, we may talk about the young black males who are living in what? In rural areas. Okay. Economically marginalized groups, again, guys, can also include people who fall within other groups. For example, people with disabilities and refugees, meaning refugees are those people who have ran away from their countries either because of the war or because of violence and so forth. So they left their countries to come to a country. So they are considered also to be economically marginalized groups. That means what? These people, they are not likely to benefit from the same job creation measures as the educated and skilled workers. Because of course we know that if you are living with disabilities, of course it's going to be very difficult for you, depending on what type of a disability that you are having, whether it's a psychological, whether it's a mental, or whether it's a physical disability. Of course, by nature of the fact that you are living with disabilities, you will not be able to access certain job opportunities. Meaning, if for example you are physically disabled, you have physical disabilities, and there are job opportunities at the mines. The mines are only hiring. Of course, you'll not be able to access those job opportunities because you are physically unable to render or to offer the labor that is required. So people living with disabilities as well as the young black males living in rural areas are some of the economically marginalized groups that we are going to look into when we discuss our third part of the topic. So, economically marginalized group, guys, in a nutshell, these groups find it difficult to access employment. First and first, very important when you discuss economically marginalized groups. In a nutshell, these groups find it difficult to access employment, as we have indicated, for a variety number of reasons that exist in the economy, and then because of education, whether because of their skills and the fact that they had limited or no access to education. As a result, they have become unemployable, or it becomes difficult for them to access employment because they do not have this education. Okay. Yes. Secondly, the numbers of these economically marginalized groups, guys, are so high that government intervention is necessary. Very important. very, very important that the mere fact that these numbers of economically marginal groups are so high, the government intervention is necessary in the economy. Guys, one of the ways government can reduce vulnerability of the economically marginalized groups is implementing the supply side policies as we have indicated. So to help the economically marginalized, the government will implement the policies in the form of education and training, which can take in the following forms. Okay, because remember we said that economically marginalized groups, they have limited or no access to education. As a result, they are not likely to benefit from the same job creation. So how does government intervene in ensuring that these economically marginalized groups at least are given a fair chance to do what? To compete and to be able to access job opportunities. So the government, to help these marginalized groups, it can do in these following forms by providing, of course, training and education in these forms. One, government can provide the bursary opportunities to previously disadvantaged groups to study maths and science, because we know that in South Africa we have a shortage of scientists and mathematicians, and many of the careers such as engineering and so forth demands that people be well equipped in terms of math and science. So the government will provide specific bursary opportunities to previously disadvantaged groups to study math and science. And government can also provide on-the-job training, meaning for those who are already employed, the government can offer on-the-job training to increase the supply of skilled workers. So these initiatives will ultimately benefit the individuals, of course, and improve the overall productivity of the economy. Then that's where you will learn more in detail when we get to grade 12, when we're going to discuss the how is the government using the Sector Education and Training Authority, SETAs? I know that you are aware there is a SETA, there's something called SETA. We have the beverage SETA, we have the bank SETA, and so forth, that are actually government-based programs that are used in order to assist the previously disadvantaged groups who fall under the economically marginalized groups in the economy. So guys, therefore, some incentive schemes in South Africa favor those businesses that are likely to employ persons from this group. So government also, very important, government also do what? It provide incentive schemes to the businesses that are actually looking into helping the economically marginalized groups through employing them who are likely to employ those persons from this group. So businesses, of course, incentives reduces the cost of production for them, leaving business with more money. So majority of the businesses would look into developing programs that they seek to address or that creates opportunities for economically marginalized groups in order to access these as incentive schemes from the government to reduce their costs. So that is basically what we we are discussing. But what is also important, guys, that you must understand, as I indicated earlier, is that the variety number of stakeholders in the economy, they strive to do what? To reduce unemployment, because at the end of the day, unemployment is not good for the economy, it's not good for local businesses, it's not good for everyone. So the private sector, not only does the government is be the only one that intervenes, the private sector also intervenes. How so? Because the private sector can play a significant role in alleviating problem of economically marginalized group, guys. They can make a meaningful contribution in our community outreach programs directed at creating employment and community upliftment. Very important, very important. Okay. Yes, so it's very important that for the purposes of your examination, to be able to briefly discuss economically marginalized groups. So these are the groups that find it very difficult to access employment, and their numbers are so high that the government intervention is necessary, and therefore there are schemes that are implemented in South Africa for businesses that are likely to employ economically marginalized groups in the economy. Guys, that is the topic of unemployment. And if there are any questions, please do forward them and we will attend to them and provide clarity, provide more explanations where required, just to ensure that you master this topic and you are able to answer any questions in the examination that relates to unemployment in your paper 2. Thank you.